Greetings, Tinia. This is a audiovisual recording, time and date stamped in the archivable format for public record. So in this one, we are going to be going through the letter of capitulation as signed, the articles of capitulation as signed between Sir Ralph Abercrombie and Don Jose Maria Chacon, who was the governor of the island of Trinidad at the capitulation that took place on the 18th of February 1797. This is when, during the war games that were being played out in Africa, where the European powers sat in Berlin with a map of the continent we know as Africa now, drew up some lines on the map for people to lock zones based on the map, and then went in to claim the areas that they locked on the map. During that mischief, Sir Walter Raleigh, on instructions from his Britannic Majesty, came across here and did some negotiations with the Spanish command on the island, and they drew up these documents after the negotiation. So I would, we're going through this document. You notice the Trinidad Historical Society publish this document, and it is listed as #1 publication. This is the first official publication of the Society of Trinidad, the Historical Society of Trinidad. So we could gather from that this is when they started. This is when this operation started. Correct? Because if this is #1, this is when it started. So we have here, I will be going through it, articles of capitulation for the surrender of the island of Trinidad between His Excellency Sir Ralph Abercrombie, KB, Commander-in-Chief of His Britannic Majesty's Land Forces, Henry Harvey Esquire, Rear Admiral of the Red, and Commander-in-Chief of His Britannic Majesty's Ships and Vessels of War, and His Excellency Don Jose Maria Chacon, Knight of the Order of Calatrava, Brigadier of the Royal Navy, Governor and Commander-in-Chief of the island of Trinidad and its dependencies, Inspector General of the Troops of the Garrison, etc. And this is the source. This is where the document is from. This book written by L.M. Fraser, History of Trinidad, Volume 1, 1781 to 1813. Government Printing Office, Trinidad, 1891. This is when it was published. So we have this Article 1. So it's a few articles. And we'll be going through all of them, because this is a very important document here. This is a record of the transfer of whatever purported powers the Spanish authorities claim to have on this island we call Trinidad, whatever they had that they transferred to the new oligarchs, the English. So Article 1, the officers and troops of His Catholic Majesty and his allies in the island of Trinidad are to surrender themselves prisoners of war, and are to deliver up the territory, forts, buildings, arms, ammunition, money, effects, plans, and stores with exact inventories thereof, belonging to his Catholic Majesty, and they are hereby transferred to his Britannic Majesty in the same manner and possession as has been held heretofore by his said Catholic Majesty. So we have it here. Article 1, it hit the ground running, as we say. To begin with, you'd notice here that island of Trinidad, let's see if I could highlight, can't highlight. But this area here, island of Trinidad, we have capital I, capital T. Capital letters are used to denote proper nouns. Therefore, this is not island in the sense of description of the type of topography or the layout of the land or the geographical makeup of the area we are speaking about. That would be a common noun, just naming a place. This is the proper noun, meaning this is the name of the place, the island of Trinidad. So this is the name of the place, island of Trinidad. We also have that all aspects that the Spanish claim to own with exact inventories thereof. So the whole concept they have pervading the mindset of the people on the island that, you know, through history things have been lost and they're not sure about what is the status of things and they can't find this because they lose it. No. Exact inventories were handed over. Exact. The Spanish who were here had a responsibility to record every single thing that was happening on the island. As a matter of fact, they had a system where the king ordained that anyone who came from Spain to the island, or not just this island, all the islands that they claim, they called them visitors, and they had a responsibility to record in a special book every being that they came across, so that it would be used as a method to confirm the information that the governor held on the island. So you wouldn't have a situation where the conquerors didn't know about a person, a being, didn't know about a tribe on the island. If people were just coming to explore, they had royal instructions from the royal bosses, His Britannic Majesty, and as they phrase it here, His Catholic Majesty. His Catholic Majesty refers to the King of the Royalty of Spain, and His Britannic Majesty refers to the royalty of Britain. So they had royal instructions. If you did not follow the instructions, your head would be relieved from your body. It was that serious. Literally, that was part of the order. I'll probably be going through that one in a while too. But so I just want to make it clear that they had exact inventories that were transferred. The information was transferred from the Spanish conquerors to the English conquerors. So that was Article 1 there, that they had to surrender everything and hand over inventories of everything. Article 2. The troops of His Catholic Majesty, that is the Spanish conquerors, are to march out with the honors of war, and to lay down their arms at a distance of 300 paces from the fort they occupy at 5 o'clock this evening, the 18th of February. So they have until 5 o'clock to put down their weapons. Article 3. All the officers and troops aforesaid of His Catholic Majesty are allowed to keep their private effects, and the officers are allowed to wear their swords. So you see how the thing playing off. You can keep your private stuff, and you can keep your sword on your waist. Everything else rested down on the ground. Article 4. Don Admiral, correction there, Admiral Don Sebastian Ruiz de Apodaca, being on shore in the island after having burnt and abandoned his ships, he, with the officers and men of the squadron under his command, are included in this capitulation on the same terms as are granted to His Catholic Majesty's troops. So this is Don Sebastian Ruiz de Apodaca. This is the guy or the commander, the admiral of the ship that was burnt, because as the story goes, when Chacon realized the troops that were assembling in the Gulf, the English troops, he gave instructions to burn the ship. The burn, I think, is three Spanish ships were in the port of Spain. And I'm not sure if all three were burned, but he gave instructions to burn the ships because they were a few of the fastest ships of the Spanish Navy. So he said he preferred to see them at the bottom of the ocean than in the hands of the English. So Article 4 specifies the admiral of that ship, he and all included in this capitulation, as it states clearly here, under the same terms. Article 5. As soon as ships can be conveniently provided for the purpose, the prisoners are to be conveyed to Old Spain. The remaining prisoners of war, until exchange by a cartel between the two nations, or until peace, it being clearly understood that they shall not serve against Great Britain or her allies until exchange. So the prisoners are to be conveyed to Old Spain. I'm making the assumption here that they're referring to what we know now as Spain. And during those travels, and even on reaching there, they are not to engage in anything against the Great Britain or allies of His Britannic Majesty. I suppose this one is to ensure safe travels. You don't want them acting up while they're on the ship going across. Yeah. You'd also notice here, Old Spain is the term being used to refer to the Andalusian Peninsula, as we know it now as Spain. So the question could be broached, where is New Spain? Article 6. There being some officers among His Catholic Majesty's troops whose private affairs require their presence at different places of the continent of America, such officers are permitted to go upon their parole to the said places for 6 months, more or less, after which period they are to return to Europe. But as the number receiving this indulgence must be limited, His Excellency Don Chacon will previously deliver to the British commanders a list of their names, ranks, and places which they are going to. So you see how organized and civilized this operation is taking place. You see, they have 6 months to get their affairs in order, whatever responsibility they have to His Catholic Majesty or the King of Spain in the other areas of the continent of America that they are conquering. They have 6 months, more or less, to get their affairs in order before they are to return to Europe. Article 7. The officers of the royal administration, upon the delivery of the stores with which they are charged, to such officers as may be appointed by the British commanders, will receive receipts according to the custom in like cases from the officers who appointed to receive the stores. So Article 7 is making it abundantly clear there is a process for the transference and collection of information receipts on the inventory of the island, of the inventory of the company, because we don't want to forget that this is a private corporation operating on the land. The Spanish king sent his agents to set up and operate a private corporation on the land, and they have an inventory of all their stocks. Some of their stocks are living people who are being categorized as stock, but they are still stock, and they need to have a system to transfer that information of that inventory to the new commanders, the British commanders, and they will be receiving the receipts according to the custom in like cases. According to the custom of this operation, we're not making any special alterations to it. We're doing it as we are accustomed to it, is what is being said here. Yeah. Article 8. All the private property of the inhabitants, as well as Spaniards, as such as may be. Let me start over that. All the private property of the inhabitants, as well Spaniards, as such as may have been naturalized, is preserved to them. It's a bit unfortunate I can't highlight in this document here because of the format it is in, but this here is a confirmation of the rights of the indigenous people, a rights to their property, a rights to their personal private effects. Or I'll read it over. All the private property of the inhabitants is preserved to them. This aspect here relates to the Spaniards, as well Spaniards as such as may have been naturalized. Spaniards that have been naturalized, meaning that they have been incorporated as stock of the corporation. They have been naturalized as citizens of this company. Their private property as well is preserved to them. The private property of the inhabitants is preserved to them. So we see in 1797, the rights of indigenous people are being reinforced. The government, the conquering warlords of the English, Sir Ralph Abercrombie, he cannot even take control of the private property of the inhabitants. He came here with 3 ships, the pride of the Britannic Majesty's land forces, and his how it is described here, the commander-in-chief of His Britannic Majesty's land forces, and Mr. Harvey, who is the commander-in-chief of His Britannic Majesty's ships and vessels of war. So these are the kind of guys who came in here. And Article 8, all the private property of the inhabitants is preserved to them. We're moving on. Article 9. All public records are to be preserved in such courts or offices as they are now in, and all contracts and purchases between individuals which have been done according to the law of Spain are to be held valid and binding by the British government. All public records. All public records are to be preserved in such courts or offices as they are now in. You understand? So it's not a situation where they don't know the information. It's not that a man come and take over and burn down the place and they can't find this and they don't know what that is. No, no, no. They signed this. We'll get to the signing. Who signed just now? But Article 9, I'll read this one over. All public records are to be preserved in such courts or offices as they are now in, and all contracts and purchases between individuals which have been done according to the law of Spain are to be held valid and binding by the British government. So they are continuing the same law and order that was in effect before they came. That is what the British are saying here now. Good? So they must have these records. They must have this information, the public records. The records of the court and the records of the public offices. All offices. All information. Land ownership, land occupation. They must have all this information. They are trying to give the impression that they lost all these things mysteriously through the passage of time. Because this was so long ago. And back in them days, they didn't used to keep records. No, so what they're talking about here then? And we're going to be getting into all of this information. We're going to be getting into it because there are laws dating back to the beginning of their operations in the 1500s. Because when they land here in 1496, the first time they land here on this island, they couldn't set up anything at first, you know. They couldn't set up anything at first. It took them a while to get a foothold. But from the beginning, they were under strict instructions that they had to keep records of everything. And we are seeing here in 1797, all the information was transferred. And to be kept in the same format. Going on, Article 10. The Spanish officers of administration who are possessed of landed property in Trinidad are allowed to remain in the island. D. Taking the oath of allegiance to His Britannic Majesty. And D. Are further allowed, should they please, to sell or dispose of their property and to retire elsewhere. So that one should be clear enough. The Spanish officers, we ain't, burning you out and running you out. No. You could keep what is yours, what you take ownership of, what you claim as yours. You could sell it, dispose of it as you see fit. You want to leave, you could leave. We ain't running you. So you see the kind of order involved in this operation. But they try to give us this concept through the indoctrination and the institutionalization that they refer to at school. Give people a concept that it was merely taking place now. It was a war. So it had no records. And they ensure war went on. Clearly, that couldn't be further from the truth. Article 11. The free exercise of their religion is allowed to the inhabitants. So this was, a breaking from the tradition of the Spanish. Spanish had a whole propaganda agenda they was pushing with Catholicism. And we will be getting into that because I am going back in time through the documents. I made a video already on the Constitution. That is actually the charter for operation of the private corporation referred to as the Government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. It is not a constitution in the sense that it is a rule book for the citizens. It is not that. It is actually a charter, it is a rule book for the corporation, for the board of directors of the corporation to respect under all circumstances. They did some mischief in August 1976, and we will be getting into that too. But I am just going back in this way. So this is 1797, a crucial point where the corporation switched owners from the Spanish oligarchs to the Britannic oligarchs. So we see here that from this point now, the free exercise of religion is allowed to all the inhabitants. So after the years of plundering, it's almost 300 years of killing and raping and murdering the people, killing the shamans, burning the chiefs on cross, and raiding the land of gold and all the other resources, and then insisting that people send their babies to the church and to the monasteries and the convents to be indoctrinated into the Catholic concept of life. After 300 years, they send their cousin, the British, to say everyone has free exercise of their religion. Moving on, Article 12. The free colored people who have been acknowledged as such by the laws of Spain shall be protected in their liberty, persons, and property, like other inhabitants, they taking the oath of allegiance and demeaning themselves as becomes good and peaceable subjects of His Britannic Majesty. So the free colored people, or in other words, the Trinidadians, because they're trying to convey a concept here that, they were slaves and they were freed. No. They are colored people, meaning that their skin is of a complexion, has a complexion. It's not pale skin. It has a complexion. Their hair has curls as opposed to straight hair of the so-called white man. But they are free nonetheless, meaning that they have full standing in the law. And we could clearly see that with this article, that they shall be protected in their liberty, persons, and property, like other inhabitants, once they take an oath of allegiance and demean themselves as peaceable subjects or slaves of His Britannic Majesty. Good. That should be clear enough there. So despite being subjects, they have full protection of their liberty, persons, and property. Article 13. The sailors and soldiers of His Catholic Majesties are, from the time of their laying down their arms, to be fed by the British government, leaving the expense to be regulated by the cartel between the two nations. So we see a cartel jumping out here. I don't know if this is the same cartel that Trump and Maduro was having issues with up until the beginning of 2026. But a cartel would be responsible for managing the expenses as incurred by the feeding of the soldiers, the Spanish soldiers and sailors, by the British government. I hope that one is clear enough. The sailors and soldiers of the Spanish crown had to lay down their arms and they had to be fed by the British government. And this feeding program will be managed by the cartel, by the cartel, not a cartel, the cartel between the two nations. Article 14. The sick of the Spanish troops will be taken care of, but to be attended and to be under the inspection of their own surgeons. So they'll be taking care of them. It's a very amicable situation taking place here. Friendly fire. Article 15. All the inhabitants of Trinidad shall, within 30 days from the date hereof, take the oath of allegiance to His Britannic Majesty, to demean themselves quietly and faithfully to his government, upon pain, in case of non-compliance, of being sent away from the island. So we have they have the corporate gymnastics that they talk about, Uniform Commercial Code. I don't know if people are familiar with that. It's a good thing to research, to understand, to understand what it is about. But in that we have a code they call UCC 1-308. That bunch of numbers there means under threat of harm, under duress and threat of harm. That is what that is referring to. And that invalidates, nullifies, and ab initio, meaning from the beginning, it nullifies any transaction. To do something upon pain in case of non-compliance means that it is not lawful. It is not legal and it is not lawful. So this here, all the inhabitants of Trinidad shall, within 30 days from the date hereof, take the oath of allegiance to His Britannic Majesty, to demean themselves quietly and faithfully to his government. This ending sentence here nullifies that. That has no validity anymore, because it is being done upon pain in case of non-compliance or of being sent away from the island. You can't threaten a boy that you gonna lick you down if you don't do as I say, and then you come afterwards and say, will he do it? So that means he in agreement. No. That is under threat. That is under threat. That is under threat. Done at Port de España, meaning Spain, Port of Spain, in the island of Trinidad. Again, island is capital I. If it was just referring to a geographical location, peninsula, island, mountain, valley, it would be common I, because it is a common noun. It is simply naming a common, it's how you say that, naming a common name. It's naming a thing. But when you use capital letters like this, capital T, capital I, this is denoting proper nouns. So this is the name of the place, island of Trinidad. That is not what it is named now. So as we get into the records, we will hopefully figure out when that change take place. Because this island of Trinidad is the name of the corporation, the company. In those days they call it a company. This is the name of the company. So, and this was done on the 18th of February 1797. These are the authors here. These are the guys involved in this contract. This is the name of the company. Somewhere along the line, the name started change to just Trinidad. Somewhere along the lines, the name changed to Trinidad and Tobago. But at this point in time, 1797, when it switched hands from the Spanish to the English, the name of it was the island of Trinidad. That is what is being referred to here. Yeah? And you notice this does not include Tobago. So, this is Articles of Capitulation. 2 days before I came across this document, I asked AI where I could get these articles of capitulation, and AI was like, what are you talking about? Capitulation? That a long time thing. They don't do them thing. That is a imaginary concept. That's what AI trying to let me know. Lo and behold, it pop up. It literally pop up. So all the mischief they feel they could do, the ancestors not sleeping. And you could also see here, this is publication number 1. This is the first publication of the Trinidad Historical Society. This is when the mischief start. Before this, it didn't really have much they could have been doing in a island-wide sense, because the indigenous inhabitants, aboriginal inhabitants, the autonomous beings of the island had them in check, so they couldn't engage in much mischief. But this is when the things start to get sticky. So this here is a notice the agent, and notice the agent is notice the principal, and notice the principal is notice the agent. I want to make it abundantly clear to the imperial forces engaged in human trafficking and slave labor on the island. This is what took place in 1797 with regards to their capitulation of this island of the English from the Spanish. I would like to revisit and highlight certain articles. Article 8, people have a concept that indigenous people, they are no rights, and we know what they're talking about. Article 8, all the private property of the inhabitants is preserved to them, as well as all the private property of the Spaniards that have been naturalized are preserved to them, meaning the people keep their private property. They would be using some brand new measures to siphon, rape, plunder, and subjugate the people to extract their energetic creations out of them. They have some brand new tactics they're going to be using now. So whoever own what, you could keep that. We coming for you. That is what this article is saying here. That was the agenda with this article. All public records are to be preserved in such courts or offices as they are now in. They're not even going to move them. The same people who are in charge of them is the same people going to be in charge of it after we sign these documents. We're just transferring ownership of the private corporation that the King of Spain is running on the island, calling it government. That is all we are doing. The free exercise of their religion is allowed to the inhabitants. So despite 300 years of indoctrination into Catholicism, now they have the opportunity to practice witchcraft, obeah, and what do they call it? Hedonistic practices, devil worship. That is what it is categorized as now. They are free to practice that if they so desire. and or maintain a good holy Christian nature and continue indulging with the church. Article 15. All inhabitants of Trinidad shall, within 30 days from the date hereof, take oath of allegiance to His Britannic Majesty, to demean themselves quietly and faithfully to his government, upon pain in case of non-compliance. So that you can't say that my ancestors make any oath of allegiance and I had to stand by it. No, that was done under pain of death and exile. So that has no validity in law or even in a legal system. Yeah? Notice the agent is notice the principal, and notice the principal is notice the agent.